Whatever you want to do.
Right, and we are live for hopefully, fingers crossed, our last day where we can invoke. It won't be our last day. It's our first day of using the foundational document. Our last day of like creating and invoking it. But we will see how it goes and what Raymond suggests for this part. We have gone through to the point where we couldn't anymore. I think there was one section, the legality section kind of thing, we needed a bit of help on. And then besides that, yes, I would like to invoke it today if possible. There we go. All right. So I don't know, Raymond, every other time we've done this, like when you weren't here the last 2 weeks, we went through it all and read it all through and kind of like kept looking at it. Is that what we should do now with you here, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've never had anybody really give it a serious attempt without me just kind of being there for the whole thing, which is kind of what I assume has to be done. So it's cool that you guys even got close to that on your own. That's awesome. I hope the concepts were able to land in such a way just from the template that it all made sense. So let's find out.
All right. So we have I'm just going to try and scroll in here. So vision is a world where abundant resources are available to projects that have long-term benefits to most beings. Our mission to fulfill that vision is we facilitate shared resources for projects that have long-term benefits to most beings. And I can't scroll up. Primary council, we have our names listed above. Where are they here? Primary council influence currency, PCICs, the description or representative influence of the primary council. I think these are your descriptions, so you know what those are, but we're the initial holdings: Jubilee, Adriel, Bentley, and Radic. I'm trying to say his old name. Mission metrics, currencies. Spent a lot of time on this one. How do you know the mission is being accomplished? So this is the other area, right? We wanted to, so our ideas are number of active brand channels, projects, number of projects involved, our total project audience, total active participants in the TogetherTec community, how many people or projects are using the shared resources, our satisfaction surveys, if we have them, and a survey on how well we are bringing about our vision statement. All right, participant.
Yeah, that sounds, I think the satisfaction surveys, you want to, like, you're actually looking for the metric in there probably. So, so positive rating on satisfaction surveys, right? Like, is actually what the metric is that says you're being successful. It's just a little note there. It's a little
This is more our brainstorming. I think we wanted feedback on like which one of these would be the most powerful.
Oh no, I think all of them are. I think all of them. Yeah. Why not? Why not have more metrics than less? And the object with metrics is things that you can actually get a direct number on and put it in a system, so you can do a chart or something like that, or in a spreadsheet, so you can see it going up and up and up. So that's where, positive satisfaction survey results, I think, is the metric that you're looking for, something like that in satisfaction survey.
Yeah, someone want to add that to the actual, I can't do two things at once. Positive satisfaction surveys and survey on, I see, yes, would be the positive.
Do we think that we need the 3 different lines here? Because I think there's satisfaction surveys, there's survey on how well we're bringing it about, and then there's net promoter score, which to me, that's the actual sort of metric that we're after, is the net promoter score. I think that was sort of the chain of conversation, but I'm wondering if people think that we need to keep them separate, or if we just want to get rid of those 2 lines and have the actual metric be the NPS.
Can include both, like, project hold, like the customer and the project holder. You know what? Like, does it incorporate?
NPS is just the model of sort of asking, like, in a short form, sort of, do you like us? Either like, would you refer us? Would you keep doing business with us? Whatever that question is, where it's 0 to 10, 0 to 6 is bad, 7 to 8 is, it's okay, like that sort of neutral, and then 9 and 10 are your positive, and then you compare percentage-wise your positive to your negative, and then like theoretically you could be, you can have a negative number if you've got more detractors than promoters, but ideally you want that number to be as high as possible.
I think in the end we will have multiple surveys we could start with Net Promoter Score, and then use the standard update process to add different surveys. So since we kind of know what that is, maybe we should say an NPS, and to Ray's point, maybe we should put what's our hopeful NPS that we want to, what's the score we want to go for?
Yeah, so like, right, it's some metric that you can
basically
do on
like that. We get rid of those two, and the new thing becomes Net Promoter Score based on how well we are bringing about our vision. Is that sort of what we try to get the answers for, and the way that we're quantifying it? Because I think we'd have other surveys, but the problem with a lot of surveys is they're hard to quantify in any meaningful way. But NPS is sort of a standard on, you're asking this 0 to 10, and it's a specific way to look at the math to sort of give, it's meant to be like an overall.
Yeah, although technically Net Promoter Score, the word promoter means, are you going to share? So I don't know that you can do that with how well we're doing our vision statement. I mean, it may be something, we can do the numbers similar to Net Promoter Score, but it's not promoter score if it's not.
Like, instead of are you sharing it, it's how do you feel we're meeting our vision? On a scale of 1 to 10. I think that's also, we'd have to redo all the other metrics, because that 0 to 6 being bad is not necessarily right. Like a 2 on that might be great right now, right? Like,
I mean,
we're doing really great. We're at 2.
The point of the NPS is to sort of be like an all-encompassing, would you recommend people do business with us? As sort of a, if the product sucks, if our support sucks, if anything about us is bad, you're probably not going to.
Well, that's how it's used in practice, but the actual question has to be, will you? How likely are you to share this? Otherwise,
well,
it's a Net Promoter Score.
The question does differ based on the context.
Hey, Jubilee, can you share the Google Doc link with me, please?
Oh, yes.
I'm just saying it's not a Net Promoter Score if you're not asking people, will they promote you? That's what the name means. It may have been bastardized since then, but I think it'd be unclear to say Net Promoter Score when we're going to ask a question that's not about, are you going to promote?
Promoter just means like, do they like us? And do they give us a 9 or 10 on whichever permutation of the question, which is basically, would you continue doing quote unquote business with us, or would you suggest others do quote unquote business with us? And we have to figure out what that means for us. But just the general idea of like, would you recommend us to others is kind of the really short form, which could still apply here.
I mean, I'm just, originally when it was first put out, it may have, I think it'd be better if we either had it very specific or left it completely vague, rather than potentially implying something that it's not to some people.
Right.
So either we need to just take it back to a positive survey result, or we need to say exactly what the question is and what the number we're going to expect is. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you wouldn't put positive in the metric. That's the direction that we want to go. But it just being a metric will be like the survey result.
Raymond said to put positive in there because that's how we know we are doing it, right? If we're going the opposite way, then we're not making those. We're not. But that's not a metric that we're moving towards.
Right. Yeah. So our goal is to have it be positive, but for this just being like, right. Okay. I see. Because of the way that it's being worded.
I think we could go through and
we know the mission is being accomplished because we have a positive score. I see what you mean.
And I think we could probably do that. Like, I think we like logically know or feeling know that like active brand channels, we want an increase in active brand channels and an increase in project involved, right? But that is, we want a positive result on all of these metrics.
Right.
So now that we have
so I wonder if we want to sort of split, although I think almost all these are going to be, we want things to be more. Like we want more brand channels, more projects involved, a bigger audience directly, and more people using the resources and a better score. So I guess if they're all better,
I mean,
that
was a bit of a brainstorm. We could also, go through today and maybe we want to either narrow this list down or pick a few to start with and actually define the, like Ray was saying, a little bit more specific metrics. I just don't think we spent a lot of time doing that. So I don't know if we want to hash it through right this second or table it and come back and do those. Or just pick one to start with, because we can always add more throughout the process.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the more the merrier in theory, right? But if so you want to get systems in place to actually track these metrics. So be realistic with yourself about how much effort you're willing to put to have those metrics in place. If you want to honor what this, sharing this vulnerably transparently, and then having people be able to see, oh, they meant it. They meant it when they said total project audience, and they're tracking that and they're providing that data. I mean, in theory, that would be what you want to accomplish.
So yeah, I suggest we have another meeting where we get those more specific, because I don't think right now we can choose an actual measurable metric for any of these.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
But you guys are, as far as I'm concerned, you guys are definitely on the right track. The net promoter score is a little bit iffy as to whether it accomplishes. I mean, because what you want to ask is, are we accomplishing our mission? Here's our mission. Write it out. And are we? So ask various questions that said, do you believe we're accomplishing that? It's like you just want to ask that various ways, really. And so, to an extent that's like a customer satisfaction kind of question, maybe you get that out of it.
Okay, I'm just going to add a note here so we know that we'll come back and see that one.
And then remember, of course, about these things, that this is always your least worst metrics that you can come up with. That is, as you go through and you continue to operate on your mission, you're going to get more and more clarity as to what metrics tell you you're doing a good job. And you want to constantly evolve these things, because if you get stuck in any one, anytime we create a game, people start playing the game to win the points in the game, and they stop playing the game for the actual mission at some point, right? So you got to continually reconnect the metrics to the scores that actually accomplish the mission.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Raymond, what you've said before when you've been here is like, what are we currently doing, right? Like, we have this idea in the vision, and what are we currently doing? And to me, it's very much how many projects are involved.
Yeah.
And that's growing. It's like that is the thing
like,
that has definitely grown. But
yeah,
and then satisfaction of those, how can we ask them, like the people who don't show up on these calls, what are you getting out of it, and that kind of thing, but without creating too much homework for ourselves. But
yeah, I think what you have there is a great start. You guys are right on track as far as I can tell.
Which that's interesting. One of the important things that I think I just heard from that is that we might want to sort of split these out, which we've kind of already got them in those groups, where we have like our direct audience numbers and then our project numbers. So like, how many projects do we have? How much audience do they have? Seems like sort of a different grouping than what's our following and what's, all of that part.
Yep.
Okay. That one in there, we can revisit that.
And then we also talked about participation currency in the future, something like, so we would get a participation currency for like showing up and being part of the meeting, and anyone showing up and watching, or like that there could be just tasks that have participation currency involved, is I think, right? Did I explain that well enough? Earn 1 PC for each meeting attended or more, or there could be other actions that we want.
Right. People. Yeah, I think the example of that was when Carrie was doing the onboarding for Facebook. That would probably have been some form of participation currency. Even if she wasn't able to show to the meetings, that's still quite useful to the group, and so would get points towards that.
And so our assets, this was, we thought we had nothing, and then we added things in the brand, just that there is that it's called TogetherTec, and we know what it represents. TogetherTec.org, the domain name and website, Facebook group, as well as the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think you probably want to define brand a little better. It's probably some kind of intellectual property thing. But yeah.
Like the name TogetherTec.
Yeah, like, I don't know, like this would be where we could use a traditional attorney perhaps, or look at probably maybe something in a non-compete agreement would give you the right language for intellectual property around a brand, right? How do you actually define that in a asset kind of sense? But yes, the concept of the brand is an asset is totally correct, in my opinion. TogetherTec.org, domain name and website, the Facebook group and the YouTube channel. Yes, exactly the kind of thing you want to list in there. And so that you know that while Jubilee, you may be empowered currently to go in and make any changes to the Facebook group, for instance, that you're acknowledging through this agreement, that actually that would, unless you went through the official decision-making process, or unless it was explicitly, unless you were explicitly given authority to do that without going through a proposal process, that that would be kind of invalidating this agreement or going against this agreement. So that's the point of listing it, and that makes sense.
Okay.
Proposal process. Proposal initiation methodology. Proposals are initiated when 2 PCIC holders are present in a board meeting. They're iterated when 2 PCIC holders are present in a board meeting. And then the important part, at least 75% of PCI holders must be present to come to a consensus on a resolution with no holders blocking. Upon positive resolution, all details of the initiation and iteration are recorded along with the details of the final proposal. Details should include who initiated the proposal, the iterations, and who participated in the resolution. So we're basically like, you can do initiation and iteration as much as you want, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be so formal, but like if it's going to be formally put into the notes, it's only, from what I understand, the positive ones, because we might brainstorm infinitely. It's the positive ones, but also we want the iterations that didn't necessarily
come
to a positive outcome.
One little clarification. I'm not sure if if you're inferring that PCIC holders will always just have 1 unit, period, always, then it doesn't make any difference whether you say PCIC holders or whether you say PCIC.
I see, because it's one credit to one person, so that can be used interchangeably. Right.
So that means what you're saying, the way you have it worded, is even if somebody had 1,000 PCIC, that it doesn't really mean anything, which kind of defeats the purpose of being a currency. But hey, it's you can word it however you want. The other thing I can think you might want to consider is whether you want to. The method would be that in resolution that any dissenting opinion would be recorded as well. You might want to have that in there.
Oh well, one sec. Blocking, participate in the resolution.
Because we're doing consensus to come to it, but yeah, that makes sense. That like we also talked about, if it does come up to a vote, if it does that whatever the outcome is, we need to record it. And yes, the dissenting voices, if there were dissenting voices, need to be
right. So I'll just add a note.
So you could just say at least 75% of PCIC must be present to come to a consensus of resolution.
Which I think that makes sense for the resolution. For these two, I think it makes sense to have the holders, because even if you've got 10 credits, you still can't have a meeting by yourself. Like, that's still not something that we want to do. And if 2 people that each have a single credit want to talk about it, go ahead. But to actually talk about, let's make a change, if there are different numbers of credits, it probably makes sense to make sure at least 75% of the credits are present.
Right.
But we don't have credit, right? We decided that if somebody's on our board, if the 4 of us have equal say, right? If we have a 5th person, they have equal say. That's what we're doing when we put them on, right?
Right.
So it isn't our other currencies, what we talked about you just coming to a meeting and getting that. That's not this, right? That's not, you're either on or off. So that it's very
think clear. The point is just to get into I think the nitpicky of legalese, where the first 2 we are talking about people. Even if we were to change how the weighting of the currency happens, we still need actual 2 humans there to discuss it, because otherwise it's just somebody talking to themselves. But no matter what happens with the scoring, 75% of the PCIC has to be there. Although I guess even there it's kind of still holders, because if somebody had 50%, we still want
that all holders will always have 1 PCIC, then it really doesn't make any difference. But the trick is, if you do end up giving somebody more PCIC someday, and you don't notice that you left it holders, then it's really meaningless, I guess, would be a concern. And I don't know what blocking means. I think you probably have to get clear on that, which could open a big old can of worms.
Yeah. I think in this case, that's referring to basically we've all got veto power, right? So if everybody, if one person says no, then it's no.
So what's 75% mean then?
So it's basically 75% is quorum. So if there's 4 holders, at least 3 holders have to be there. And if any of those 3 say no, then no. And that's the same thing. If we have 10 holders, then at least 7.5 people have to show up. But again, if
Okay.
any of them say no, it's no.
Okay, so it's actually full consensus, but in order to even recognize that full consensus has happened, you want 75% of PCIC to be present on the call at the time that the recognition of consensus happens. So that could be word of mouth, somebody saying, yeah, I talked to Fred. Fred is totally on board. We have his consensus. And so, right, something like that enables that to be the case, which I think is good.
Yeah, I think in this case, we're saying that the holders must be present. So I wouldn't count, me saying, oh yeah, I talked to Bentley and he's it's fine. If that was there and Bentley was the one person that wasn't there, but we still had 75%, I think that's okay. And I might be able to pass on a no from Bentley if it was like, oh, I talked to Bentley offline, he's not here, but he said no, so we can probably count this as a no.
Bentley, why are you putting so many things in our way?
Yeah, so negative, jeez. Always canceling things.
Yep. That's me.
And that was like with consensus, you can block it because blocking for my language is like a red card, right? Like you're basically saying, I'm leaving if you're doing this. Where there's another option, which is like, hey, I don't agree with this decision, but it's holding us back. I can see why the group agrees with it. I dissent, but I'm not blocking, right? And that would be, yes, we want to include that. We want to know who said that and what happens and who was there and who wasn't there.
Right. So do we think it's clear if we change that to instead of blocking be vetoing? Because that's kind of what we're doing. It's like you can say no and that won't stop it, but if you veto and say nope, I'm putting a stop to it, like that's kind of, I think, a version of the red card yellow card thing where you can vote against it but not, if there's 10 votes and 1 vote against it but that person doesn't veto it, then fine, it still goes ahead, but anybody can choose to veto, and that's like, nope, I disagree with this strongly enough to say no, I'm vetoing.
Yeah, I think veto might be a more common terminology for what
I think, and having because the initial idea from what I understood was that there was just you're voting for it. If you vote against it, then you're saying absolutely not. And that's that. But this kind of gives a way to say you can vote against it and that goes on record, but you weren't doing it strongly enough to say absolutely not. And then veto is an extra layer of anybody can do it, but that kills it.
And so that's where the veto isn't quite the same as a red card, because a red card is, I feel so strongly about this that I am leaving the project if you all go forward with it, which is not the same as veto. That's saying it's just not going forward, right? It's like, it's not just one-sided. It's like, listen, you get the distinction that it's like, you guys could still go ahead with it, but I won't be on board, right? Versus, no, you can't even go forward with it, right? So...
yeah, I mean, that's what a red card means, but that distinction I don't think is important to what we're doing, because whether the person stays or not, they still have the power to say, I mean, they could always say yes and then leave or just not show up for the meeting.
Yeah.
So that would be the red card in the action, but in this case, the result of putting that blocker down is a veto, is what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm.
I guess the issue is you have to feel strongly enough about that thing you're vetoing that you're willing to leave over it, right? And that is the distinction, is like, to some degree, you can't just be like, I vote for this other thing. Like, there's a little higher metric, but I'm okay with the language of veto. And I think that whatever we decide, and as long as it's clear, it's going to be when we come up against that first one that the rubber really hits the road and we start to see, wait, yes, what is the difference between a veto and a red card? And
yeah. So you're setting an
I think there's
expectation
always
for
the implication of people can always leave. Like, no one's chained here. So if you can veto, even if you don't feel super strongly about it. If you're like, I really don't want this to happen, and the way that we have the rules set up is you can do that. And if the group was like, no, screw that, we're still going ahead, you might leave over that.
Yeah, I think the piece I was missing, Jubilee, was that it is. You were trying to set the level of importance when you would do that. So that's interesting. I'll have to think about that some more.
Yeah, unless you guys want to document all of what you're talking about around veto and all that stuff, you really just write it all up exactly how you want it to be. I think that what I put here, though, covers all of that without you having to get into exact details.
So
this part over on the side, you mean?
One thing I'm seeing different that to me reads as being different is, in this case, it sounds like you wouldn't be able to vote against it and still have it happen. which I think there is some good in having that. If you don't feel strongly enough to use your veto or raid card or threaten to leave over it, but you just want to on the record that like, no, I'm not for this. We may allow one of those, like to allow a vote against it, but not have it be stopped.
Well, you notice
other people want that?
You notice I don't use the word vote in any of the protocol.love. I just don't use it. I don't think it's necessary to use that word because it just harkens back to too much old KMA stuff to me. But you keep using it, I notice. So like, I think the wording here is, so I can desire it to be positively resolved, even though I don't completely agree. And then I would record my dissenting opinion. And so this wording allows for that.
I see. So
yeah, we just may want to explicitly say that, and they can record a dissenting opinion. Right. I don't think that's
so. I would like to record a dissenting opinion. However, I do desire this proposal to be positively resolved, and therefore, that meets the criteria for it to go forward.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I'm also fine with that.
And so, and this does also leave room for, like we said, word of mouth about a desire for positive resolution.
Right. That
only 75% need to actually be present if we're aware that 100% wants it positively resolved. So if that's what you intend, then that wording will handle that.
Yeah, so you're saying that if we know that someone doesn't want it to go on and they just aren't available for the meeting, then we can't go forward, is what you're saying.
Right. Yes.
If we think they might veto it, then. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the intent of our process.
Okay. The only thing, and it's fine if this is getting too nitpicky, but I wonder if we want to swap out desire for something more like approved. Because if you're dissenting, but you're like, yeah, it's fine. I don't desire it, but like, I'm okay with it, I guess.
There you go. Yeah, that's great.
So then we want 100% of PCIC must approve for the proposal to be positively resolved. Does that make sense to everyone else?
Yeah.
Must approve for the proposal. Okay, I like that. And then upon positive resolution, all details of the initiation and iterations are recorded along with the details of the final proposal. Details should include who initiated the proposal, the iterations, and who participated in the resolution.
And again, perhaps, and any dissenting opinion, but that's up to you guys.
Yeah, probably good just to have that include. I should put that here. There you go. How's that?
Cool. And I always, capitalize things that are, that's standard legal law practice is capitalize things that are referring to self-defined, not inherently understood, but needs to be. And so you do define board meeting in the operational notes.
Right. Okay. Cool. That makes sense.
I think we did, right? It was just like that. It happens at this time on this day. Well, I just remember it further down, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
You did. I was saying you did define it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jurisdiction dispute resolution. We didn't know who these people are and whether they would, but that's okay. Discussion notes, open collective doc. This is literally just our notes, right? Because we didn't know. We were talking about it and how this would be a really good first project for TogetherTec because we all need to incorporate our various projects, but how much work do we want to put in looking at the different states and the different countries for our project? So that's why there's so many notes here. What was this intended for? Was it more for internal jurisdiction or external jurisdiction? Like conflict with other companies and other outside things, or in between the various projects and within TogetherTec, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's both for sure. It's just saying that we are entering this to an agreement by our own like personal desire to be in agreement with in an agreement field with each other. And if we ever dispute that, then what do we do? I mean, you know, if somebody is feeling like I need to know, like if we have a problem with each other, of course we could try to work it out, but I want to know what happens if we can't work it out. So if anybody is feeling tension around that, this is when that really needs to be brought up. And if there isn't tension around that, if there's a trust that we'll work it out internally, so that's the internal part, right? And then the external conversation is more like, are we concerned about anybody disputing our stewardship of these assets in such a way that they might bring up a dispute in the form of like a lawsuit, which relies on an external jurisdiction, right? So in the outcome that you guys would receive a letter in the mail that says such and such, you know, court has opened such and such case and you need to respond. Like, you know, what do you do in those circumstances? Because you've given that court, you've inherently, nothing you've written here inherently gave that court any jurisdiction over you. But yet you could recognize that the tension of that would be, what do we, gosh, that would feel, how would we deal with that? We haven't explicitly acknowledged they have any jurisdiction over us, but like there's so many people that would probably infer that they do have jurisdiction over us. So do we like this is the public opinion, the court of public opinion kind of thing, right? How do we want to address it? And again, if there's tension around those subjects, think about it and write it down before you complete this document. If you all feel like you're in the same page and you're fine, just by like inherently not acknowledging inherent jurisdiction or something, you might want to write that. Or if you just want to leave it undiscussed, you can just get rid of the section.
For how this actually gets used, I mean, this whole thing is essentially an agreement between all of us. You know, it's on record. We've recorded them where we're going through talking about it. In the end, I assume, you know, we're going to all agree to it. So that's sort of implied where anything that we have here, we've all agreed to. But I'm wondering how that works for like the users or customers. Wouldn't that only come into play once there's something for them to sign or agree to, like, you know, user terms of service or like an actual, you know, software agreement or something like that? Or is there some, you know,
in theory, I mean, you know, like I said, the rubber meets the road is if one or more of you get a letter in the mail that says it's a lawsuit requiring your response.
Right.
So how do you want to deal with it?
This is someone else suing us.
So my question is, if it's not somebody who's a part of the council and will have actually, you know, read and agreed to and signed this whole thing, you know, if somebody in Sweden gets mad at us and decides to open up a lawsuit, my understanding is that like the only way that we can set the scope of, you know, where they're able to sue us is if they agreed to something, whether it's, you know, terms of service for the website or some sort of a purchase agreement or something like that, where they're signing a piece of paper saying, I agree to the jurisdiction of blank if I enter into legal proceedings with TogetherTec. Is that the case? I mean, that's my understanding.
Again, nothing stops anybody from not following that logic and just filing a lawsuit, and therefore you get a letter in the mail. So the question is, like, we haven't acknowledged any relationship formally, we haven't acknowledged any legal relationship. We certainly have acknowledged any jurisdiction of the government of Sweden to have any say over our dealings with this person. Right. So the question is, do we respond to like the big question you have to consider at that point is, do we respond to this thing? If you do respond to the thing, are you inherently acknowledging the jurisdiction of the Swedish government just by even responding? Right. Or are you responding to with only the intention to make it clear that you don't recognize their jurisdiction? Thank you very much for the letter. This is the last time you'll hear from us. Like these kind of things. And again, if you're not feeling the tension around these things, it feels like that's a really far, that's a what's the word? Edge case. It's an edge case, and we're not going to be concerned with that right now. Great. I think that's wise as well, not to get bogged down in this stuff. But this is the time when you want to consider that.
Right. And I mean, I think that I think it's a fringe case until if things start to take off, that's one of the avenues of attack that could be used. And that's where, you know, it's not important until it is.
That's right.
And I guess the areas where we can be compelled to say, we don't care if this, if you think that this is in your jurisdiction, we're going to make it your jurisdiction. We're like, Sweden couldn't do that, but Jubilee and I are in Canada. If somebody from Canada sues us, and we decide, I wanted to deal with that, the police could show up, and whereas Sweden doesn't really have that option.
Maybe, yeah. And so that's where you might want external advice on how to, one of the easy answers is incorporate in Canada, and then but do that as a resolution here. Decide, so recognize that this entity is your primary operating agreement between you as honorable beings who care about each other and the relationship you have with each other. This is our primary foundational operating methodology, and we realize that we can start a Canadian corporation, and we can put right in our operating agreement of that corporation that this entity here and the definitions of decision making are actually what apply to that corporation. So that's another way. That's another thing you can use this section for. You could say we intend to create incorporate in Canada, or whatever the details would be, and have that corporation operating agreement specify that governance is done via the methodology specified here by this group.
Right.
And so I have in the U.S. I have that in the works where we'll have a standard LLC operating agreement that anybody can use that does exactly that. Like, so you want to file an LLC, its operating agreement specifies the decision-making process is defined on this collective document, which can be found on this URL, and all like proposals, all decisions made by the, what do they call them? I forget the word for, it's not shareholders with an LLC, but all decisions made by the shareholders will be officially recognized in this way. And so it's a template. It's just a standard operating agreement template that anybody can use. And so we can work on getting that done if you guys want in Canada by the time before we get all this said and done. I'd be glad to help you figure that out. So stuff like that.
That's very much what we're not looking to incorporate right now because we don't have the money. We don't have there isn't anything to necessarily incorporate, which is why this process was really powerful to go through to get to this point. I'm wondering though, I know the point of incorporation is to protect yourself legally. Well, not the whole point, but a big point of it. And part of the beauty of what a lot of people in Game B and what TogetherTec is doing is that we are a global organization. So we could pick basically any country. We just need a member to be able to incorporate in. But what we're kind of talking about actually also makes us more at risk. Like if we don't have a corporation, if we have a corporation, then it's TogetherTec they would have to sue. I don't know if they could take us apart unless we pierce the corporate veil and sue like Bentley or Radek or, Edelnai. And so if Sweden does that and we're in Canada, F you. But if we have a Swedish person on and they're like, yeah, we're going to go after them, but they can't because it's like the organization, I don't know if they can tease us apart and sue us individually. Because then there's almost always going to be someone to sue in your country.
Based on the action that you'd be suing for.
In my experience, usually if there's a lawsuit against a corporation, they usually just name the corporation and any name of any person they can possibly find. They just name them all as plaintiffs and then leave it to the court to settle whether it's the corporate veil can be pierced or not.
Yeah, I agree with the idea of we're probably not going to incorporate this anytime soon. And I think there will be a point probably once we get to a certain threshold of assets where we're like, okay, we actually if we have a decent website, we're starting to have some software under this and there starts to be things of value. I think and we did then decide where to incorporate. And the first step is really just for us, right? To figure out if Bentley wants to sue us, where does it happen, right? If there's some disagreement amongst us, because that's my understanding is this will only ever apply where there's a signed agreement. So once we get into having some kind of a member forum or software people are signing up for, we can put something there that says, the jurisdiction of this company, product, or whatever is, Canada, US, Sweden, wherever it ends up being. But I think that's only needed for the public once we have something for them to sign. So I don't think there's no influence over each other until there's that.
I'm certainly no legal expert, but my understanding of what would represent an agreement that the court would recognize as an agreement is the acknowledgement that there was an agreement, right? And so one way you can acknowledge that there was an agreement is through a signature on a piece of paper. That would evidence there was an acknowledgement of the agreement. Here's the details of the agreement. Look, court, there was an agreement. But another, it could, if you said we agreed we would exchange red paint for blue paint, and the other party said yes, we did agree to that, the judge is likely to recognize that that is a valid agreement.
Right.
It's the same. So I think this could be argued to be an enforceable agreement, just what you've written here, and the fact that you actually, if everybody on the team says, yep, I was part of that process, just like it says at the top. And in fact, on the invocation, I usually recommend people just do something with their Google account to recognize it was actually, but
Right.
This probably could be argued to be an enforceable agreement.
Right. Yeah. I guess my point is between the people who were party to it.
Right.
Like, so if some new person joins from Sweden 2 weeks from now, hasn't seen this, has no idea that we ever had these meetings, and is just participating in TogetherTec.
Right.
We have no capacity to tie them to anything until,
Sure.
and I, to your point, if we have a member forum or some software that they have to agree to the end user license agreement, that's where we put this, and then only agree to the EULA if you agree to it, if you agree to the jurisdiction and everything else in there.
Yes. Sounds right.
I think, is it okay to have in here, like, to me, this is somewhat just an agreement between the four of us. And so to say, we already talked about when we first started having this discussion on this section, the internal disagreement, right? That like we agree not to go to the external court of law, that we will deal with
like internal
arbitration, right? Our own internal arbitration and that kind of thing. And I think that is, if we have that here, we don't have any assets at the moment. But let's say something does happen, this becomes $1 billion company, and we come back to, oh wait, were we? You know what I mean? Like we agreed not to go to the court of law. If that changes at some point because this becomes $1 billion company or something, then like that needs to go through this process. I can't leave, come back in 10 years and be like, hey, I was part of it, I can sue you because I started TogetherTec, right? Like, nope, you can't. You agreed to not sue. You agreed that this was something about, that was kind of where this started, right? Should we have that in here? That we don't externally sue? I don't know.
I think there's something about that's like the last step. Like, participants are expected to go through internal conflict resolution or dispute resolution before involving courts.
Yeah, you could just do that as an operational note. I suspect that if any court was going to acknowledge that as valid, that you would have to have some kind of third party, I would guess. So you could identify somebody, and then your simple statement that we will agree not to sue in court until an internal arbitration or mediation process has been completed with such and such and so, but they would probably recognize then that as legally binding, and that they're not going to hear anything in court until that's happened.
So like, as long as the internal process involves some sort of a neutral third party.
I would guess that's the criteria they'd be looking
Right.
for. If you're going to say it's an arbitration agreement, then it would need to specify who and how now. Or at least that there's a procedure to agree on somebody when the time comes up, or something to that effect. That'll be my guess. And again, I'm certainly never been to a day of law school in my life in any jurisdiction. So,
well, Ray, is it fair to say that the intent of this section was are you going to incorporate what type of incorporation? What is your legal entity? That was the intent of this, not specifically internal deliberation?
both. It's definitely both. And what I found in doing this process was that we would get through it, and then like kind of right at the end, sometimes somebody would go, so wait a minute, they bring up whether we get sued or whether there's some kind of dispute. And it's like, well, you guys haven't given jurisdiction to any external government. Like if you do a standard LLC kind of thing or whatever, you inherently have given jurisdiction to the locality that you did that filing in. You're saying we want to be in your jurisdiction. So
right.
Please
we're gonna follow your laws and
yeah. So if you haven't done any of that, then you haven't done any of that, right? And so that certain
right.
for me, that is the best way to operate. I feel so good operating like that. But for some people, that brings up a little tension. They're like, well, but wait a minute, there has to be an authority in the world that could solve this for us if we dispute.
I think the issue is there is jurisdiction. Incorporating helps, like if the four of us incorporated, we then wouldn't be legally responsible as long as we didn't pierce the corporate veil. But because we're not that, there's four of us who are legally responsible and they can come after our houses, our cars, our, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
It doesn't, like, and
Our various
Bentley
governments could.
would be Texas law. Adriel and I would be British Columbia law, right? Like we don't get to, it's like the people who are like, hey, I didn't agree to pay taxes, so I'm just not going to pay taxes. Yes, and they will come and throw you in jail. Like as much as you might be in the like right that there is, but I like that we can just be like, hey, we were just having a conversation.
I guess my point is that internal dispute resolution, I think, is a completely separate thing than jurisdiction. And I think having them both in the same section is confusing.
Well, I think
when I think internal, that means
we're talking more about
you.
that part, right? Because it's jurisdiction
I'm
slash
just saying
dispute resolution.
That's why it'd be helpful if there wasn't a slash there and it was two different sections, because they are two completely unrelated things. One usually happens after the other.
Well, but I think part of it is in the agreement contextualizing where that jurisdiction is as a part of it. So like if you make it through the dispute resolution and things aren't resolved, here's where court proceedings will happen, right? Like you, by agreeing to this, you agree that, we'll abide by the laws of BC. And so if you're going to sue, you sue in BC or Texas or wherever it ends up being. And then we're sort of saying, well, we hope that things don't get there. So we're saying if you're internal, we're hoping that you'll go through internal dispute resolution as a start. And then if we go through that and things don't work, then we go into the jurisdictional part as far as, okay, where do lawsuits happen? That's my understanding.
And again, the reason I listed Jacob Cabrera is that he's got a lot of experience in this jurisdictional conversation. So if you guys are interested in claiming a jurisdiction now, I think he can really help you get into some of the details and recommendations that he's come across as the best way to handle it. And if you're not concerned about it, just remove this whole section.
Well, so I mean, I think it'd be helpful to have a dispute resolution section. Although I don't think that's necessary right now. I think we could add that in later. And I definitely don't think we need a jurisdiction until we choose where we're going to incorporate and such.
It's good to spell it out. Like I do like the effect of having it, even if we're just saying, hey, we're not going to have this yet. We won't actually incorporate until X. And then, we'll have conversations around where, but there is some fact of like, hey, how do we agree to deal with our disputes internally until we do that incorporation and until we have, jurisdiction come into play where it's not us, where it actually is some country or state or province.
Yes, and I feel like it's inherently said, especially because you're requiring 100% PCIC, right? So basically, if there's a dispute, nothing can happen, right? Nothing can get done. Nothing can move forward.
That's the resolution, though. So, I mean, we have a dispute resolution process. If anyone disagrees, it doesn't happen. It's resolved.
That's kind of already said.
The full consensus is a dispute resolution process.
That's right.
Exactly. Well, but that's specific to proposals, right? That, I mean, a dispute could come out of a proposal, but it could just come out of behavior. It could come out of, you want to do X and I want to do Y, which I guess
but you could make a proposal about anything. So if you're having a dispute, you can make a proposal.
That's right.
But if it's something that already happened, then what would the proposal do?
I don't like that Adriel picks his nose on board meeting calls. I want to make a proposal that Adriel cannot pick his nose on board meeting calls. And then you can...
That helps for future forward. But like if it was, Adriel burned down my house, I would like to say that Adriel can no longer burn down my house. Okay, but he already burned down your house. What do you want to do about that?
Well, right. But what do you want to do about it? If you think he needs to pay you back for it, then you make a proposal that he pays you back for it. Everything is future. You can't have a dispute resolution process about the past. It's always the future.
Wondering where this comes, because like TogetherTec is the project of projects, and there's like the projects under that, like WikiLection, and I don't think those are necessarily right now in conflict, but they absolutely could be, right? So there's a very big difference between TogetherTec, which is what we're doing, right? This isn't WikiLection's not held by this, solution raising isn't held by this. That there's like who's in dispute, right? Because at the board meeting, we're figuring out how TogetherTec moves forward, but the actual disputes can take place between projects or between people that don't really have to do with the board meeting of TogetherTec itself, right? So they're not going to be iterated, right? No one's going to ask, can I burn down your house? They're just going to go and do it, and then there has to be that resolution after. And they might not be us, right? So they might not be the people who are even part of the meeting, but there's still a conflict in that, still
I think
dispute.
we need to discuss this further. I don't know. Maybe we should put this on the list of things to discuss.
Yeah, I think that's still highlighted, and I think in the next session, I think we'll be going through and talking about the ideas.
Awesome.
I think this part is probably good. We can probably actually approve that. And then there's this. So I think it's the two sort of open questions are still the things. The feedback from Raymond definitely helped guide the conversation towards where it seems like it should properly go. But I agree that there's still more chatting to them about at least those two things. Anything else? Yeah, I think that's
Your audio is completely off. I can't hear you. So.
weird. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's partly mumbling, partly mic quality. That's like the one.
Make sure it's swap microphone. Okay. I was
The easiest,
just saying. Sorry. Go ahead.
the easiest way out of it would be to just simply say, we can't really make any decisions right now about where to incorporate and whether to incorporate anywhere. It would be nice to have something in the document. And about incorporation, it would be something along the lines of we are happy to cooperate with legal structures that exist, and we will incorporate when it is useful for us to do so. And the jurisdiction is, but the real question behind it is whether we recognize any higher instance than our own ability to solve conflicts internally. And to that end, again, the easy way would be to arbitrarily say we are going to create a small corporation just so we have it somewhere, and we only have to decide where exactly, and then agree and ask any future members to agree that this is the one thing we have, and in case not expected but still not impossible, if we need some higher instance, we just go there because we have it and it's there, and we don't need really anything else. Unless someone wants to have, like, specifically be not judged, but have resolution conflict under, I guess, some special jurisdiction like Swedish, then it's totally different thing.
Sounds
Yeah.
almost like we're trying to plan out the different phases or milestones where there's like a pre-incorporation. How do we want to deal with it then? And we don't have to hash out every detail of any incorporation steps, but more just when are we going to talk about incorporating TogetherTec? Well, what are sort of the things that we think we'll want to watch for, so that when it's time to have that conversation, right? Because it's hard to have that, we don't really even know what assets we'd be stewarding, that at that point we're like, okay, we need to incorporate, and then we say what country is it, and the whole thing where you kind of have to draw a line in the sand. It might just be, what do we do prior to having that? Because to Radek's point, we haven't signed pieces of paper saying that we're signing up to any one country's laws. We obviously have to obey our laws of the countries that we're citizens of, but that's a different story. But for the actual organization,
I'd like to put something that's literally just the opposite of we don't honor any of the jurisdictions until we're incorporated. Now, can we in any way hold that? No, we still live under human law, but at the same time having that there, and I like the idea of the timeline, saying pre-incorporation when we would incorporate, and post-incorporation we don't know.
Okay,
but having it.
Yeah, again, I just want to catch the game A language trap we're getting into. This is technically an incorporation by any legal definition of what incorporation means. This is an you are incorporating just by having this document be agreed to by you guys. So what you're actually talking about is, at some time down the road, we will probably recognize an external jurisdiction to help us to resolve disputes with our incorporation here. And we will do so by perhaps incorporating in that jurisdiction by their methodology set forth in subsection such and such of such and such and such and such. And even though we know that ties us into game A and is likely to in some way go against the truest intentions of this organization. We recognize it is a benefit to our ability to do business in the world or interact with society in a greater way. Like you could put all that in there, which just like makes it so clear that you are coming from a sovereign place and you are choosing to do business with a external jurisdiction by sovereign choice. Not because you have any sense that they actually have authority over you, but because you acknowledge that it's a wise thing to do to get in bed with one of those guys.
I like the idea, but we will discuss it further next week. Do we want to continue going on while Raymond's here and make sure we've gotten to the end of the document that we needed? Had any questions on? This is
sure. I think this part
accountabilities. So we didn't think we had any, and then we started adding them. Facebook. Bentley puts up a weekly project update, which I feel like we've gotten more engagement. That could be a metric. I admit people to the Facebook group and StreamYard. Adriel posts the meetings. Our website, I own the domain name right now, but Bentley will be the one updating it. Website, he'll do the content, but I actually own it just because I do. YouTube, playlist, management, I'm in charge of putting them in the right playlist if they're not done. Operational notes, our meeting time and requirements to maintain influence currency, specific plan, etc. Board meetings are at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Fridays. So it's that time zone that if we change our time, it's for that time zone, which is good because Texas, but Europe is on a different one, right? So that's partly why it's on. There's a specific time zone incorporated in vocation. We're not doing that yet because we're not there yet, right? So we probably need another week then, it sounds like, to go over and get that language clear on the other parts now that we had your feedback, Raymond. So is there anything else you have to suggest before?
Yes, one other suggestion. Anything that you feel like you want to get this invocation process done, that there's some things unresolved, then I would move those unresolved things to an initial team accountability. Right? Just say, resolve this issue, resolve the jurisdictional conversation, just put that on something that you need to do and then invoke,
Mm-hmm. So we have one more week to do that, get that all clear so that this page looks like it's something to invoke, and then we can move those things over somewhere else, right? To be like, this is an agenda for our first official meeting.
I can say like everything that is not already specified can say, hey, we know that jurisdiction is important at some point in time, so it becomes an accountability, so it's there, but it's not here because we've got the paragraph that says we're not doing that yet, or however we want to phrase that, saying like we're not incorporated anywhere yet, so whatever that means.
Yeah.
Traditionally, like under construction.
Yeah. 1997 website.
The appropriate animated GIF.
Yeah. You can store it on GeoCities.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. It's such an honor to see any of this work getting put to use and for to make sense, especially to really intelligent Game B player people like you. So it's really, truly an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your help with this. It's been a really interesting process to sort of go through and see the changes and see the conversations that come out and where we agree and don't agree. It's funny. This is like our 7th session, but like every one of them has been jam-packed with like us talking about stuff and getting in the weeds. It's been, I've enjoyed it.
Good.
Yes, it's been a very good process to go through, which I'm sorry I had to go get my kid on a call for her class. Like, it's at 1, jump off, do that.
Cool. And if any of you want to put that in writing and just send me a little note that I can like put on the website with,
We actually want to give you a video thing. Wow.
Yeah, I think probably what
we can do it
in the final session, we'll like sort of at the end of it, we can give a spiel, and then we'll probably like not show the screen so you can have a clip, and then you can slice and dice that video however you want.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
have full access to all of these too, all of our 10 hours of conversations in its own playlist, so that there's some. Should Adriel do want to end the broadcast? Goodbye to Facebook and YouTube. See you next week.
All right.
Hey guys.